When the CEO told me my role was being eliminated, the room went quiet in a way that felt rehearsed. His voice was calm, almost apologetic, as if he were reading from a script written long before I walked in. I listened, nodded, and thanked him, while something heavier settled in my chest. This wasn't just a job ending. It was years of work, late nights, and a technology I had poured myself into, suddenly placed out of reach. I left the building in a daze, replaying every meeting, every assurance, every promise that had implied partnership and shared ownership. The timing felt too precise, the reasoning too clean. I knew enough about corporate decisions to recognize when efficiency was masking intent. Somewhere between the elevator ride and the parking lot, the realization surfaced: this termination wasn't accidental. What unsettled me most wasn't fear of unemployment. It was the thought that what I had built might now belong to someone else. In that moment, standing alone with my thoughts, I understood the stakes had shifted, and nothing felt negotiable anymore. For years before that meeting, my work had been the quiet engine behind the company's most valuable breakthroughs. I wasn't chasing attention or titles. I was focused on building something that actually worked. The patent at the center of everything wasn't an abstract idea scribbled on a whiteboard. It was the result of countless iterations, failed prototypes, late-night revisions, and hard-earned insights that only came from being deeply involved at every stage. I understood the technology because I had lived with it. I had defended it in technical reviews, refined it under pressure, and translated its value to teams who didn't yet see its potential. When obstacles appeared, I didn't delegate them away. I stayed until they were solved. Over time, the innovation became inseparable from my professional identity. It wasn't just intellectual property. It was proof of competence, judgment, and persistence. Leadership praised the results openly. Investors cited the patent as a cornerstone of future growth. There were conversations about long-term vision, shared upside, and mutual trust. Nothing about the environment suggested my contribution was temporary or expendable. That sense of alignment is what made the termination so destabilizing. Because losing a job is one thing. Being separated from something you helped create, something whose value you fully understood, is another entirely. And that difference would soon matter more than anyone realized. In the days that followed, the story I'd been given began to unravel. On the surface, the termination was framed as restructuring, a clean business decision with no personal undertones. But the more I reviewed documents, emails, and timelines, the clearer the pattern became. Decisions that once felt collaborative now read like positioning. Conversations I had trusted took on a different meaning when viewed through the lens of what came next. The patent wasn't just valuable, it was transformative. And suddenly, my removal coincided perfectly with moments when ownership, control, and future licensing were being quietly discussed without me. Legal language that had once seemed routine now felt deliberately vague. Clauses I had skimmed in good faith revealed loopholes designed for moments exactly like this. It wasn't incompetence or coincidence. It was preparation. What hurt most wasn't the loss of status or income. It was the realization that trust had been transactional. The loyalty I'd shown hadn't been mutual. It had been convenient. I had believed contribution guaranteed protection, that value earned respect. Instead, I was learning how easily narratives could be rewritten once power shifted. That understanding changed everything. This was no longer about a job or even recognition. It was about ownership, authorship, and whether the work of my life could be quietly absorbed and reassigned. And once I saw that clearly, there was no going back to ignorance. Once that reality settled in, fear followed close behind. Not the sudden kind that spikes your pulse, but a slow, grinding fear that seeps into quiet moments. I was no longer just up against a former employer. I was facing an institution with resources, legal teams, and time on its side. Every option carried weight. Fighting back meant expense, exposure, and the possibility of losing not just the patent, but years of my life to a battle I couldn't control. Walking away meant safety, at least on the surface, but at the cost of swallowing something that felt fundamentally wrong. Questioned myself constantly. Was I overestimating my position? Had I misunderstood the agreements I once signed with optimism instead of suspicion? At night I ran scenarios in my head, imagining courtrooms, depositions, and the quiet humiliation of being told I never truly owned what I thought I did. The doubt was exhausting. So was the isolation. Most people don't know how to advise you when the stakes are abstract numbers attached to very real consequences. What made it heavier was the absence of certainty. There was no clear signal telling me this was worth it. No guarantee of justice. Just a choice between discomfort now or regret later. And that kind of decision has a way of stripping away bravado, leaving only an honest question. What are you willing to stand behind when the outcome is unknown? After nights of wrestling with fear, I realized inaction was its own kind of surrender. The choice became clear. I could remain sidelined, hoping the system would eventually recognize my work. Or I could step into the fight fully, knowing it would be uncomfortable, risky, and far from guaranteed. I chose the latter. Preparation became my lifeline. I studied every contract, every clause, every communication that touched the patent. I consulted mentors who had navigated similar battles, absorbing their advice while filtering it through my own judgment. It wasn't dramatic. It was tedious, mentally exhausting, and yet strangely empowering. The more I learned, the more I understood that knowledge itself was my greatest weapon. Every setback along the way tested resolve. Calls went unanswered, documents were slow to arrive, and moments of self-doubt surged with each obstacle. But with each challenge, the decision to fight hardened. I began to map the strategy like a chess game, anticipating moves before they were made and positioning myself to defend what was mine. By committing fully, I transformed fear into focus. The battle wasn't glamorous. It was quiet, deliberate, and relentless. But in that deliberate grind, I found agency, a sense that, for the first time since my termination, I controlled the trajectory of my own story. Victory didn't arrive with fireworks or a grand announcement. It came quietly, through a legal decision that confirmed what I had believed all along. The patent, and everything I had built around it, was rightfully mine. Holding that confirmation in my hands, I felt a wave of relief that was almost physical, a release from months of tension, doubt, and relentless vigilance. The settlement wasn't just financial, it was validation. It was proof that preparation, patience, and courage could outweigh the inertia of power and bureaucracy. More than the $920 million figure, it was the recognition that my work, my judgment, and my persistence mattered, and that no one could rewrite the story of what I had created. In the aftermath, I realized how transformative the process had been. The victory reshaped not only my career but my understanding of risk, value, and self-trust. It was a reminder that justice and opportunity don't always arrive when expected, but that measured action, even against intimidating odds, can create outcomes that feel almost impossible until they happen. Holding the rights in my hands, I understood something crucial. The fight wasn't just about the patent. It was about claiming ownership of my own career, my own narrative, and refusing to let circumstance define my limits. Looking back, the battle taught me more than any victory could have alone. It wasn't just about winning a patent or reclaiming a financial stake. It was about understanding power, trust, and the responsibility that comes with knowing your own worth. The experience revealed how easily contribution can be overlooked when systems favor perception over merit, and how critical it is to defend what you've earned before others. Rewrite the story. For anyone facing a situation where your work, ideas, or value feel threatened, the lesson is clear. Don't wait for permission or validation. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet, deliberate commitment to stand for what's yours, even when the odds feel overwhelming. Every action, every decision to prepare, research, and engage thoughtfully compounds into leverage you didn't know you had. Victory is sweeter when it's hard-earned, not simply handed down. But more importantly, the journey proves a deeper truth. Your potential, your contributions, and your right to protect them are only as limited as your willingness to act. And sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't just reclaim what's yours, it transforms how you see what's possible. In every future challenge,